Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 14 of the Santa in his reindeer ornament tutorial. This is the Santa in his reindeer ornament that we are making. It is so cute with Santa and all his reindeer and all the little houses and the moon. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. And today we're going to be making the unit called Third Top Snow. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 13 yet, that's okay. You can do these out of order. I'll have those videos listed down below in the description. That way when you finish this one, you can go back and watch those. We just have a few materials to get ready, so let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we'll be using in today's video are all Miyuki Delicas. I have white pearl AB, opaque light sapphire, and bright copper plate. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to call this white, blue, and copper. We'll also need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire thread in the color Crystal, and this is a 4-pound thread. You could also use a 6-pound thread in this project. And then I like to use a size 10 beading needle. A size 11 or a size 12 would also work. For implements, I like to use my long nose pliers to hold onto my thread at the end of the video, and then I cut my thread with scissors. And then today I'm going to show you how I use the fire method to end the tail. So we just need to thread our needle with about 3 feet of thread, and then we can get started. So I've threaded my needle and now I'm ready to pick up my first 3 beads. Let's pick up 3 blue beads. Now I'm going to take these beads and pull them down to the bottom of the thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. Now let's make a square knot. So we'll cross over on the top and then pull the tail through, and then cross over on the top again and pull the tail through. Now we have 2 loops. What I'm going to do is put my 2 fingers in the lower loop, the one that has the beads in it, and then I'm going to tug on the tail thread and the long thread until that top loop turns into a knot. Now, I'm not going to touch the tail thread to the flame, but I'm going to get it super duper close so it melts the tip. And it turns it into this teensy little knot. Now, keeping my fingers in the loop, I'm going to be pulling on the long thread while I'm twisting the loop until that little knot at the end of the tail meets the long thread. Now I'm going to take my thumbnail and I'm just going to pull that knot all the way down to the beads. And it turns the beads into this teensy little triangle, and that completes row number 1. Now you'll notice that the knot is set kind of in between the 2 beads. So what we want is for it to look like it's coming out of one of those beads. So let's just tug the thread over to one side until it looks like that knot is coming out of one of the beads. It also looks like the thread is coming out of that bead. So now we're ready to pick up our next 2 beads. Let's pick up 2 blue beads, and we're going to sew through the bead that the thread is not coming out of. So sewing through that next bead, and then we're going to try to get our new beads to sit right on top of the beads right below them. And now we're ready to pick up 2 more blue beads. Now our thread is coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead. And once again, we're going to try to get those new beads to sit right on top of their buddies, the beads right below them. Now let's pick up 2 more blue beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead, and this time let's sew through its buddy, the bead that's right below it. And when we sew through 2 beads like this, what we're doing is we're stepping up to the next row, putting our thread in position to start that next row. So that completes row number 2. Now we get to start row number 3. Let's start with 2 blue beads, and we're coming out of this bead. Let's sew through the next. Oops. Now let's pick up 1 blue bead, and we're coming out of this bead right here. If you notice, the next bead is set downward a little bit. We're going to skip that downward bead. We're going to sew through the next one that's poking up. So we're going to skip the down bead and sew through the up bead. Now let's pick up 2 blue beads and sew through the next. Always making sure that our beads are sitting right on top of their buddies. Now we'll pick up 1 blue bead. We're going to skip the down bead and sew through the up bead. Now let's pick up 2 blue beads and sew through the next. And now we can pick up 1 blue bead. This is the last bead in this row, so we're going to skip the down bead and sew through the up bead and also sew through its buddy. Sewing through those last 2 beads means that we are now in position to start row number 4. Let's start by picking up 2 blue beads and sew through the next. Then 1 blue and sew through the up. 1 blue and sew through the up. 2 blue beads and sew through the next. One blue and sew through the up. One blue and sew through the up. Two blue beads and sew through the next. One blue and sew through the up. And one blue and sew through those last two beads. And now we get to start row number 5. Let's start with 2 blue beads. Then 1 blue 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue and 1 white bead this time. One blue, one blue, one blue, two blue beads, one blue, one blue, and one blue. Sewing through those last two beads. And now we get to start row number 6. Let's start with 1 blue and 1 white. One blue, one blue, one blue, one blue, one blue and one white, one white, one blue, one blue, one blue, two blue beads, one blue, one blue, one blue, and one blue. Sewing through the last two beads. And now we get to start row number 7. Let's start with 1 blue and 1 white. One white, one blue, one blue, one blue, one blue, two blue beads, one white, one blue, one blue, one blue, one blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we have actually reached the top of our triangle. So our triangle is not going to get any taller, but it is going to get wider on these 3 sides. So what we're going to do next is without picking up any beads, we're just going to sew through that next bead. And that puts our thread in position to start row number 8. So let's start row number 8 with 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 white, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 copper, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we've reached the top of our triangle again. So what I like to do is turn our triangle over, and now we are ready to start row number 9. Let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 white. Now you'll notice that we don't have an up bead to sew through to get our last bead on this row. So what we need to do is turn directions and sew down that top white bead. And then we need to make sure that our new bead that we just added sets in place, because sometimes it doesn't want to set exactly where it goes. So you just kind of have to manipulate it until it's sitting right where it's supposed to. Now we're coming out of the bottom of this bead, so let's sew down the bead right below it. And I know I'm saying below even though it's upside down, but it literally is going downwards on our triangle. And so we're now coming out of the bottom of this bead. Now let's change directions again, and we'll sew up the bead that's right next to the one that we're coming out of. Now we will sew up that top bead again, and then down the new bead that we just added. Now we can turn our triangle over, and you'll see that our thread is now in position to start row number 10. Let's start by adding 1 white bead, then 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we've reached the top of our triangle again, so let's turn it over. And now we are in position to start row number 11. Let's start by adding 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. And once again, we don't have one of the up beads to sew through, so we need to turn around and sew down that top bead, then set our bead in place where it's supposed to be sitting, and now let's sew down the middle bead in the second row, and then we will turn direction again and sew up the bead right next to the one we're coming out of, and then up that middle top bead, and then down the new bead that we just added. Turning our triangle over, and now we are in position to start row number 12. Let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, oops, I have a little knot in my thread, so I'm going to just pull these two threads away from each other and straighten out my thread again, getting that knot out of the way. Okay, sorry about that. Carrying on, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. And that completes our 12 rows in our triangle. So let's turn it over. And this completes our 12 rows, but we still need to add our connection beads. If this is the first triangle that you've done with me, you'll see that I always add beads so that we can connect the units together. And every unit is different. Some sides are going to have connection beads while other sides are not. In this particular unit, we are going to have connection beads along this side and on the bottom of our triangle, but we're not going to have connection beads on this side. So let's start our connecting bead row by adding 1 blue, 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 and 1 blue. Now we're at the corner. We need to cap this corner by adding 1 blue bead, and it turns the corner into a little point. And so now let's start adding our connection beads along the bottom. Let's start with one blue, one blue, one copper, one copper, one blue, one blue, one blue, one blue, one blue, one blue, and one copper. Now we're at our final corner, so let's add one blue bead just to cap it and turn it into a point. And now what I like to do is turn over my triangle, and without adding any more beads, let's sew up 6 beads or 6 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now we're going to do what I like to call the zigzag. So we're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's turn directions and sew down the bead right next to the one that we're coming out of. Then we're going to switch directions again and sew up the bead right next to that one. Now let's sew up 2 more rows, 1 bead at a time. 1 and 2. And now let's do another zigzag. So we're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew down the bead right next to it, and up the bead right next to that one, and then up 2 more rows, 1 bead at a time. 1 and 2. And what we have done is secured our last bead that we added. Now I'm super confident that it's not going to get loose when we're connecting our units together. So now it's time to cut our thread. So let's hold on to our thread with the long nose pliers and get the scissors as close as possible to the bead without cutting the bead, and then just snip off the thread. And that completes our unit. We only need one of these units for the project, so I will see you in a sec. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.